Right now, somewhere on this planet, a person is sweating through their shirt on a hot afternoon. It's annoying. It's uncomfortable. Most people would trade it away in a heartbeat if they could. But that sweat? It's the reason you're alive. Because 2 million years ago, your ancestors made a trade. They gave up something every other mammal on Earth still has. And in exchange, they got something almost nothing else has. They lost their fur. And here's the strange part. Losing that fur should have killed them. No fur means no protection from the sun. No fur means freezing nights. No fur means getting torn apart by every predator with claws and teeth built for exactly this kind of opportunity. So why would evolution do something so obviously dangerous? The answer isn't really about hair at all. It's about heat. And it's about a hunting strategy so brutal, so relentless, that scientists still argue about how any animal could survive it, let alone thrive because of it. Let's go back further first. About 7 million years ago, the ancestors of both humans and chimpanzees were covered in the same thick coat of hair. Chimps still have it today. Look at one closely though, and you'll notice something odd. Underneath all that fur, chimp skin is pale, almost human-looking. That's a clue. Fur was never really about skin color. It was about temperature control. So somewhere along the way, something changed for our branch of the family tree. And it wasn't gradual comfort. It was survival pressure, and a brutal one. Here's the situation our ancestors found themselves in. Roughly 2 million years ago, the climate in East Africa was shifting. Forests were shrinking. Grasslands were spreading. And that meant our ancestors had to leave the shade behind for good. Out on the open savanna, under direct equatorial sun, a furry body becomes a serious problem. Fur traps heat close to the skin. For an animal that just naps in the shade all day, that's fine. But our ancestors weren't napping. They were doing something almost no other mammal on the savanna could survive. They were running down prey in the middle of the day, for hours, until the animal collapsed from heat stroke. Scientists call this persistence hunting. And it sounds almost too simple to work. No spears at first. No traps. Just walking. Then jogging. Then walking again. 4 hours. Sometimes most of the day. Chasing an animal like an antelope until its body physically shuts down from overheating. Here's the twist though. Antelopes are faster than humans. Much faster. So how does a slower predator win? Because antelopes cool down by panting, and panting doesn't work while sprinting. They have to stop to cool off, again and again. Humans don't have that limitation. We cool down through something almost no other running mammal does efficiently. We sweat. And sweating only works well if heat can escape through the skin instead of getting trapped in fur. That's the real reason our ancestors lost their hair. Not comfort. Not appearance. Endurance. Losing fur meant losing a layer of insulation that was actively working against survival. But it created a new problem almost immediately. Bare skin under direct sun is dangerous. Skin cancer, sunburn, dehydration. All very real threats for a creature spending entire days exposed with nothing covering it. So evolution didn't just remove the fur and stop there. It replaced protection with something else entirely, melanin. As body hair disappeared, skin pigmentation increased dramatically to shield against UV radiation. This is why some of the earliest evidence for dark skin appears around the same time period as evidence for fur loss. It wasn't two separate changes happening by coincidence. It was one survival system being rebuilt piece by piece. But wait. If losing hair was so useful for endurance running near the equator, why isn't every human on Earth built the same way today? Because as humans spread into colder, less sunny regions thousands of years later, that same UV protection became less necessary. In fact, it became a disadvantage. Weaker sunlight meant skin needed to absorb more of it, not block it, in order to produce enough vitamin D. So lighter skin tones eventually became more advantageous in those regions. In other words, the traits we associate with global human diversity today trace back to this exact survival trade-off that started under the African sun, then kept adapting as people migrated into completely different environments. Losing fur solved one massive problem. But it didn't happen in isolation. This is where it gets even more interesting. Because becoming a hairless, sweating persistence hunter didn't just change our skin. It rewired an entire survival strategy from the ground up. Persistence hunting requires an enormous amount of water loss through sweat. That means our ancestors needed reliable access to water sources and, crucially, the ability to predict where water would be days in advance. Some researchers argue this pressure may have influenced early tool use and even social cooperation, since successful persistence hunts likely required tracking skills, route planning, and knowledge passed between individuals over generations. There's also a physical cost most people never think about. More sweat glands meant our ancestors needed a completely different water intake strategy than other primates. Humans have significantly more eccrine sweat glands than chimpanzees, sometimes estimated at 2 to 4 times as many. That's not a small adjustment. That's a full biological overhaul just to support one hunting strategy. So here's the bigger picture forming. Losing hair wasn't a random mutation that happened to work out. It was one part of a chain reaction. Fur loss enabled better heat regulation. Better heat regulation enabled long-distance endurance. Endurance enabled a hunting method most predators physically cannot use. And that hunting method may have shaped human social behavior, tracking intelligence, and even our upright walking posture, since running efficiently on 2 legs uses far less energy than running on 4. It's worth pausing here, because this idea alone reframes a lot of what we assume about early humans. We tend to picture cavemen as brute strength hunters, overpowering animals with spears and raw aggression. But the science suggests something almost the opposite. Our ancestors weren't the strongest. They weren't the fastest. They won through patience, heat tolerance, and the simple refusal to stop moving. Which brings us back to today. You're not out on the savannah chasing antelope. But every time you sweat through a workout, or feel your shirt stick to your back on a hot day, that response evolved for one specific reason: to keep you alive during hours of relentless movement under brutal heat. Modern humans still carry this ancient cooling system, even though almost none of us use it the way it was designed for. We just complain about it instead. But there's still a mystery here that doesn't have a full answer yet. If persistence hunting explains why we lost body hair, why did we keep hair specifically on our heads? Some researchers suggest scalp hair protected the brain from direct sun exposure during those same long chases, acting almost like built-in shade for the one organ that couldn't afford to overheat. Others think it may have played a role in social signaling, helping individuals recognize each other or display health and age. The truth is, scientists are still debating it, and no single explanation has fully won out. And that's honestly one of the more fascinating things about human evolution. We assume it's mostly figured out. But new fossil evidence, new genetic studies, and new comparisons with other primates keep reshaping the timeline, sometimes overturning ideas that stood for decades. So the next time you feel sweat on your skin, remember what it actually represents. Not weakness. Not discomfort. It's proof that somewhere in your ancestry, a small, slow, fur-covered primate made a trade that no other predator on the savannah could match, and it paid off in a way that eventually built the entire human species. What do you think actually pushed our ancestors onto the savannah in the first place? Was it climate, competition, or something we haven't discovered yet? Let me know what you think down in the comments.